Hey guys, Cliff Gray here with Flat Tops Wilderness Guides and True Hunts. So this is the first part of what I'm just going to call like a basic kind of field navigation series I'm doing. It's just going to be two parts. And the overarching concept is just going to be to talk about, the scenarios that I see. And this is over, north of 1,000 hunters I've dealt with and outfitted or guided over the years. The situations that guys run into when it comes to navigation, getting lost, common mistakes, those sort of things in the mountains. Okay, so this first part is going to be really not really like a hands-on demonstration. I'm going to show you some things on the map, some general concepts that I think that particularly in the Mountain West, even up in British Columbia and other parts of Canada and Alaska, some general concepts just about how drainages run, stream systems, trail systems, stuff like that. I'll go over that, and then I'll go over just some common mistakes I see guys make. Okay, my hope is that when you're out in the field, you'll remember these general concepts, and it'll help you avoid making kind of some common pitfalls. Okay, so that's the first part of the series. The second part of the series is I'm just gonna kind of go over some what I would call save your ass type of navigation. I'm going to focus on navigation using the sun, so I'll cover that in the second part of this series. Okay. All right, guys. So a couple things that you should focus on when you're doing your scouting via maps, Google Earth, or whatever of your hunting area you're going to go into. Okay. First thing you want to do, and you can familiarize yourself with this relatively quickly, is figure out how the drainages run, where you're going to be camping, where you're going to be hunting. Okay. So for instance, these drainages here on this part of one of the areas that we hunt here, the drainages basically run north-south. Okay, that's the general case with these drainages. When we're here, okay, we look at this set of drainages and they run east-west. Okay, so familiarize yourself with that. I'll get to why that's really important when we talk about some common scenarios, but familiarize the direction of the drainages. Okay, all right, which way, as you go up elevation, you're going to the east. As you go down elevation, you're going to the west. Or in these drainages, when you go up elevation, you're going to the north. When you go down elevation, you're generally going to your south. Okay, so familiarize yourself with that. And then what I tell guys is just because you think, okay, I'm just gonna hunt these set of drainages, familiarize yourself a little bit with the surrounding area, particularly if they have perpendicular direction drainages. Okay, and this is a perfect scenario: north-south, east-west drainages. Okay, and then up here we've got north-south drainages actually meeting east-west drainages here. Okay, on the left-hand side. So those are areas you got to be particularly focused on. This is more of a plateau topography here, but in more like a high ridgeline type of alpine topography, like let's say the Collegiate Peaks, the Continental Divide in the Gore Range of Colorado, something like that. Usually you're going to see that matchup of drainage direction, like north-south hitting east-west or whatever, usually at peaks of the ridges. Okay, so you want to kind of pay attention and understand how those drainages lay in there. Okay, all right. The next thing you want to do in terms of familiarizing yourself with the area is familiarize yourself with the waterways. Okay, and generally most drainages in like Colorado, they're going to have water in the bottom, so it's pretty easy, right? You familiarize yourself with the drainages, you know there's waterways in there, but know your bigger waterways. All right, it's very clear on maps, all right, where those waterways are, so familiarize yourself with that. And then what's going to happen on waterways, even in super remote areas, guys, like all the wilderness areas in Colorado, most of where I've been in British Columbia, even really remote areas, what you're going to find is all this country, even though most of it's roadless and there's no road access now, you're going to find that over the last 100 years, horse packers were in there a lot more than you think. Okay, it seems like when you're in these areas, sometimes it seems like you're the only person who's been there for a century or whatever. But the reality is a lot of them have been packed a lot on with pack stock. Okay, over the years, so there's usually pretty good trails. and almost all those trails were busted in along waterways, okay? So familiarize yourself with those, because those are really important for you to understand or vaguely know where they're going to be if you already get lost in the area you're hunting, okay? So familiarize yourself with that. That's a key scenario. And what you're going to find, particularly in Colorado and the Mountain West, there's a lot more pack trails than you think, okay? And you can, like, a lot of your Forest Service maps and stuff, they won't show a lot of them because they've been kind of decommissioned. They're off the maps. They don't get maintained, whatever other reason. But on Google Earth, a lot of times you can see pack trails, okay, that are no longer marked. And so that's good for you to know where those are at. Like I said, they're generally going to be parallel to good waterways, okay? That's how the guys broke into this country, is they were using waterways. All right? The other thing you should try to do, particularly in like a plateau type of area where they can be pretty pronounced, is you want to familiarize yourself with the peaks, right? Okay. A lot of times there's only 2 or 3 that can be pretty good landmarks for you. So familiarize yourself with that. In big, like what I'd call 14 or 14,000 foot peak type of terrain in Colorado or something, those peaks can be it's a little less useful because there's a lot of little peaks together or whatever, okay? But you can kind of vaguely familiarize yourself with them too. That'd be helpful. All right, guys, so now on to the kind of conceptually staying found type of concept, okay? More of a little lecture on that, all right? What I'll say is this. Generally, the hunters that I've dealt with that were truly lost, usually what it was they were very confident they knew where they were when they actually didn't, okay? So they progressed on a track to get pretty severely lost, all right? So that's kind of an overarching concept you really need to watch out for. You need to really make sure as you hunt, you do know where you're at. Don't take any piece of input like, a landmark, even a compass or GPS or whatever. Try not to take a single piece of input as fact, okay? Whenever you're kind of hitting on where am I exactly right now, just make sure you try to correlate a couple of those inputs to make sure you actually know where you're at, right? Let's say you've been storing your compass next to fishing weights or something, and now it's reversed. If that's the only thing you depend on, you can get severely lost, all right? If you think a peak that's got to be the peak that I know, but it's not that peak, and you've been using it to navigate all day, all of a sudden 3 or 4 hours later, you've been using a single point of input, and now you're severely lost, all right? So really be conscientious of that. It's just something you got to think about. Okay, so now we'll go over some common ways guys get lost. The first thing I'm going to talk about is related to the direction of the drainages that I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about doing a little map scouting, okay? All right, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to zoom up here a little bit for you guys. All right, guys, so let's talk about a common scenario where a guy can get pretty darn lost in a wilderness area, okay? And like I said, it has to do with the direction of the drainages. We have north-south drainages here. We have an east-west drainages here, east-west drainages here. And then we kind of have fairly flat terrain in between them, all right? Let's say that you're camped in this north-south drainage here, all right? And so you've gone up to the top, the plateau. Let's say it's archery season or early rifle season, and the elk are up in that country, all right? So you're hunting around here, and then you haven't really been focused on staying found, right? Really knowing exactly where you're at. So you've been hunting in this flat, and then this is a pretty gradual slope down into this drainage. Let's say you've gotten down in here, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, we need to head back to camp, all right? And then you think, it eludes you that you've come out of this drainage. You kind of think you're still in it. This is very easy to do, particularly if you haven't familiarized yourself with the country beforehand. And you say, okay, well, I know the camp's down the drainage, all right? So what do? You start going down the drainage, all right? Well, now you're in this drainage and you're going this way. You're basically, 90 plus degrees off of the track you need to go. And so camp is here, and every minute you progress, you're going to get further and further away from camp, okay? That's a very typical jump the drainage scenario, all right? And that's pretty common. So you need to make sure whenever you start dropping down a drainage, remember the compass bearings, or just generally north, south, east, west, something like that, the direction of the drainage that your camp's in. Okay, so that way if you accidentally start dropping down another drainage, you'll quickly know that you're way off track. Okay, and you can stop it before it becomes a scenario where you get really severely lost. Okay, so keep that in mind. And there's some really easy general ways to do that. You can do that with the compass, you can do it with the GPS, obviously, and you can do it with the sun. Okay, you can get a general sense of if you're going the right direction or not. Okay, just with the sun, and I'll cover that in part 2. But that's like your standard jumping drainages scenario, and all of a sudden getting yourself lost. Okay, very problematic in country that is plateau country, like the flat tops, or other regions like that. In country that is real high, rugged ridgeline country, it's a little bit harder to do, because generally you're not hunting right in those ridge lines, right? But if you're goat hunting or something and you're way up in the shitty stuff, you can still do it, because you can wrap around a little pinnacle or something and all of a sudden start dropping down a drainage that you don't realize is not the drainage where your camp is, or where you want to go. Okay, so that's a concept. Keep that in mind. That's the first big one. All right, guys, so the next concept that I'll talk about in terms of staying found, not getting lost sort of deal that I've seen, and if you think about it a little bit, you can avoid, and that's what I call spatial disorientation. All right, and this is a real concept that they talk about a lot, particularly in aviation. I remember when I was going through learning how to fly, it was a big topic, and it's actually how they say JFK Jr. ended up crashing his airplane. All right. So in aviation, the concept is, particularly when you're like over a lake or it's dark and you don't have a lot of input from from our world that's made of physics and the truths that are in physics. If you don't have a lot of input directly into your brain, what can happen in an airplane is you can actually think up is down, down is up. Okay, you lose a sense of gravity. It's almost a surreal feeling. Kind of an out-of-body type of feeling where you don't have a sense of gravity or whatever, right? So you can actually just turn your airplane over, think you're going up elevation, you can just drive it right into a lake, and that's what they suspect JFK Jr. did, all right? So now why the hell am I talking about all this? Well, there's a perfect analogy when it comes to hunting, particularly in the mountains, all right? And it has to do with thick, dark timber, all right? Thick, dark timber, particularly in areas that have really bad beetle kill, when you start busting timber, right, for whatever reason, it's usually not a good hunting strategy to do this, but if you're just navigating around and you need to get through some timber, which if you hunt the mountains enough, you're going to need to do, when you start going through really thick, dark timber, okay, you lose input from landmarks, right? It's very hard to see the peak that you saw, or you're the ridge line or whatever. Those all disappear when you're in the timber. And so the problem is that is combined with the fact that now you're actually looking down to navigate more, okay? Because obviously there's timber in your way. It can be fairly thick, but if it's down timber, like you got beetle kill or whatever, you've literally got to look down a lot just to make sure you don't trip up and eat shit, right? So that's taking away any other sensory input that you have in terms of navigation. And what happens is you're kind of, even without thinking about it, you're navigating that down timber and you're doing it in a way that's the easiest path, right? Well, you can do, in terms of like the bearing you're heading on, you can be all over the place, all right? So just like the aviation example, you get the same spatial disorientation aspect, right? You can go through timber, and when you pop out, you can immediately think like that peak is, that's the peak that I went in here looking at, right? Well, what you don't realize is you lost all the input while you're in the timber, and it's not the peak that you thought it was, okay? And so now, if you start using that, you can get severely lost, all right? And the other thing is you can just come out, particularly, they say there's this difference in male and female brains and how we use directions. And it is, to me, it is kind of true. Most males, when they drive around town, they know north, south, east, west, right? Well, I've experienced this several times, this spatial disorientation. When I come out of the timber, I think I'm headed north, and when I come out, north is going to be that direction. And when I come out and I kind of do a good check of where I'm at, I realize that I'm looking east instead of north, or I'm looking west instead of south, okay? All that loss of input while you're busting timber can really mess with you, okay? So keep that in mind when you're going through timber. That's a time when, while you're navigating it, you want to kind of keep track where you're at, but particularly when you come out of it, don't use a single input to decide where you're at, okay? That can lead to getting lost pretty quickly, all right? So that's the second concept. All right, guys, so the third concept I'm going to talk about can be summarized as it doesn't look the same when you're coming back, okay? This is a concept that our brain tricks us on, okay? We're going down a trail, we make a turn or whatever, we're navigating along, we're going out hunting, and our brain tells us like, oh, I'll recognize that turn when I come back, all right? Even though I'm looking at it this direction, for whatever reason, my brain tells me that I can recognize this when I'm looking in this direction, okay? Even though those two sight pictures are going to be completely different, okay? And this can trick guys pretty quickly, okay? First, it's just the general concept. Like let's just say the trail's perfect, all right? There's just a perfect tee off the trail, all right? So let's say you're walking out and you take a left on the trail, right? And right there's you can look across the trail and there's an old conifer snag there. It's very recognizable, right? Okay, so you take a left, you go hunting, and you go, oh, I'll find that easy when I come back, all right? Well, when you come back, what you didn't realize is that snag is kind of behind some live timber when you're coming from the other direction, now the direction that you were hunting in, right? So you're coming back to camp, and you just don't see the snag, all right? So you pass it, and then you also pass the trail that you needed to take the right-hand turn to get back to camp, all right? So that's the basic concept, is just always realize that things look a little bit different on the way back than when you're going out, okay? Now, I'll show you a real perverse example of this that can be really tricky, all right? This is one that I've run into several times with guys, and if you know about it, you can avoid it, all right? So we're in an area where there's some defined pack trails, right? The old mountain guys were busy in there for years. And so the solid line here is our pack trails, right? These could be 6 inches to a foot eroded in the ground, little mountain highways, all right? So in this area, and this is very common across the Mountain West, there's also some backpacker traffic, right? Some foot traffic, or just hunters over the years or whatever. And they know the area. So what they've been doing is they've been cutting these trails, okay? They've been doing little shortcuts between the tees and the main trail, all right? And that's what these little dashed lines represent. And at times they're just as defined as the pack trail, but other times they're real vague, right? And sometimes it varies on what end, what end of the shortcut we're talking about. Like this end, it could be very defined. And then this end, it could be very vague. And that could just be based on the vegetation there or whatever. And so that becomes a big problem when we think about this concept of everything looks different on the way out than it did on the way in. So let's just talk about an example, all right? And this could lay out in a lot of different ways, but here's just one way it can occur. So here we are at camp, right? I've got it marked with the C. I don't know if the video reverses it or whatever, but just bear with me. So that's camp with the C, and we're gonna hunt down here, all right? So we leave camp in the dark. We wanna go hunt prime hunting time, all right? So we leave camp in the dark. Maybe we've got just a slight little, the morning sunrise coming over the mountains to help us a little bit. So we're on the main pack trail, right? We're going out. We don't even really notice this trail off to the left on the main pack trail because we know where we're going, right? So we're just headed out, okay? We may or may not notice these little shortcuts here, but we don't notice them enough to consider using them, all right? So we go out, we just stay on the main pack trail. It's dark. Let's stay where we know we're at. We hit the T and we go left, okay? We take a left. So our brain knows we're going to have to take a right when we come home if we use the same trails, right? So we go left. We go down here, we go hunting. All right. Have a long day, blah, blah, blah. Time to go back to camp. All right. So we start heading back to camp. And for whatever reason, we didn't, this little shortcut here, we didn't see it on the way to the hunting spot, which is really common because look here, see that angle? Okay. These quartering shortcuts, a lot of times when you're going out, they're just angled kind of off your rear quarter, okay? And it's very hard for you to recognize them. You can pass them and almost always you won't realize they're there, okay? On your way in, let's call it, all right? But on the way out, on the way back to camp, we're just walking on the trail and we don't even realize that the trail just kind of takes us that way. Let's just say that's pretty grown in. We're not expecting that shortcut anytime soon, or we're not expecting the right turn anytime soon, all right? So we're going this way and we don't even know it. Well, one thing nice is we're going towards camp, right? So who cares, right? The problem is even though we're going towards camp, we're looking for a right turn, right? We're looking for this right turn, okay? So we keep going. We haven't made that right turn. We're thinking, man, I should have taken that right turn, right? Like maybe I missed it. Maybe I didn't. And then all of a sudden, look, boom, there's our right turn, okay? I knew it was here somewhere, standard deal. Boom, take a right, headed to camp, right? Well, actually, you're headed 90 degrees plus away from camp now, all right? I mean, who knows where you're going, okay? But the problem is you're confident because you took the right turn, all right? And you only took one left turn when you went out, okay? So you can see this is a scenario where you can get severely lost and what I call confidently lost, okay? So make sure you understand that this can occur. And again, don't use a single input for knowing where you're at, right? Like the trail, okay? Because anytime during here, like when you make this turn, if you had a way to realize what your bearing was, you'd immediately know you're going the wrong way and you can stop a problem before it happens, all right? So that's the third concept, guys. I hope you find that useful. The next section is going to be pretty cool. I'll show you just some cool ways to navigate using the sun and just some little intuition there. All right, guys. So just a quick review. You know, big picture thing is realize that the way to get really, really lost is to always be, you know, really confident that I know where I'm at, okay? And using a single input, right? That's how you end up getting really lost. And then the three underlying issues that I see a lot and you can catch if you know about them is one, know, you know, how your drainages lay and recognize when you jump into a drainage, okay? And you can recognize it early that you're going the wrong direction when you start going down elevation. The second concept is spatial disorientation, all right? And that's, you know, the example I use is when you're going through the timber, realize that, again, you're losing a lot of your inputs and you can get very confident that you're going one way or the other and you're not, okay? Particularly in that dark timber, in that timber that's down. Be really careful in that, all right? And the third concept is to watch these cuts in the trail, okay? Watch for those shortcuts and always realize that things look different on the way back than they did on the way in, all right? So I hope that's helpful, guys. Good luck out there.